Joining me now is Shahram Hadian. But before he does, take a look at this. I put this at worldviewreport.com today. Who are armed queers Salt Lake City? Utah-based trans militia group under scrutiny after deleting social media account on day of Charlie Kirk killing. This is going all over. Authorities probing the September 10th assassination of activist Charlie Kirk are reviving online activity, are reviewing it, and several left-leaning groups in Utah after at least one organization removed its social media presence in the immediate aftermath of the killing, sources say. Among the organizations under review is Armed Queers Salt Lake City, a Utah-based group that has described itself publicly as training and organizing LGBTQ plus people to defend their communities. Now, folks, what is it they need to have their communities defended from? Well, first of all, I covered this briefly on radio today, but I'm going to go into more detail tonight with Shahram Hadian. This group, apparently some of their leaders, you can hear a video, took a trip to Cuba recently. What? How can you do that and just come back into the country without a lot of questioning, or at least red flags, right? Pardon the pun, red flags. Speaking of red, look at the red star. Look how queer is a hammer and sickle. Queer resistance. Now, they go on to list out their 6 principles. I mentioned them on radio today. They bear repeating. The armed and militant protection of queer and trans communities and all oppressed people. Wait a minute. How are they oppressed? They equate words now with the need to respond with being armed. So if you quote the Bible when it comes to marriage, sexuality, etc., if you don't agree with LGBTQ, if you don't agree with drag queen shows, if you don't agree with grooming children, if you don't agree with chemical castration of children and hormone treatments so that a little boy can apparently think he's a little girl, then apparently that is oppressive. And the answer is militant LGBT group being armed? What's their second of their 6 principles? The end of capitalistic oppression and exploitation. Movement towards a socialist society. Yeah, because capitalism is oppressive. You have to get up and get a job and work and, actually take a shower and bathe. And maybe, hey, ladies, shave your armpits. Go to the work, shave your legs. Don't come in there looking like a hairy ape, and actually provide people with customer service to keep a job. Well, that's oppressive. You expect me to get up and shave and actually look good, decent? And guys, good luck finding a job at most places when you show up as a guy in a dress with a bunch of makeup on. So these places don't want to hire folks like that. They're not looking for a freak show at their company. But apparently that's oppressive to have to actually behave and act your born sex. Capitalism's oppression. Really? Well, then what is communism? What's killed more people, the free market capitalist system or communism? Communism, folks, has killed well over 500 million people. I've gotten into that before. 3, trans liberation from the gender binary and biological essentialism, not assimilation. Trans liberation from the gender binary and biological essentialism, not assimilation. Housing as a human right and necessity not to be profited from, put an end to landlordship. And who's going to, by the way, want to have apartment buildings and homes for rent and condos for rent if there's no profit? Where's the motivation? How has free housing worked out, by the way? We've had free housing. Remember all the slums we have in America from years gone by when the government was giving out free housing? You want to live in a nice house, in a nice neighborhood, where if there's a leak in the roof, it gets taken care of? Well, that usually comes from an entrepreneur, a free market guy who has a profit motive. Nothing wrong with that, offering a service. Well, how about 5, abolish police and prisons as they serve as nothing but oppressors. 6, the end of bourgeoisie, assimilationist LGBTQ organizations, the start of radical queer and trans organizing. This is nothing but communism. And they're going to use the communists are going to use the transgenders to do it. Now, I tried to tell the pro-family groups 20 years ago that cultural Marxism was using the LGBTQ as a cannon fodder for a communist revolution. A lot of them didn't want to listen to me. I tried to tell them, when you go out here and you come out against the gays, if you don't root it in communism, you're missing the point and you sound like a bunch of haters. But if you will explain that they're using these people as cannon fodder for a revolution and that this is really communism, Marxism, cultural Marxism to destroy the family and to destroy masculinity, because after all, that's what the Frankfurt School said. The folks that came here from Germany in about 1933 said their goal was the destruction of the patriarchal society, a man-led society with patriotism and strong leaders. Think John Wayne. So here we are. And as always, the pro-family group is usually multiple years behind the curve. We haven't even been able to get them to talk correctly for years about the Islamists, much less the Marxists. But here's the proof of what I was trying to tell them back then so many years ago, that there are communists behind this. This is really the communists using this group. Because what they need, according to Herbert Marcuse, is a coalition of victims. Who is it that's oppressing you guys? It's a capitalist. Who are they oppressing? The immigrants, the illegal immigrants, the LGBTQ sexual liberation groups, minorities, feminists, women. These are some of the groups they're oppressing. So you're a coalition of victims, and who is making you suffer? The Christians and the capitalists. The Christians and the capitalist. The source of all suffering is Christianity and capitalism. That's what I've been telling for years in my books. The Marxists at the Frankfurt School were saying the source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity and capitalism. And that's why I think they killed Charlie Kirk. Because Charlie Kirk represented Christianity. Did I agree with every theological or doctrinal thing he espoused? No. Did I agree with every person that he met with and promoted religiously? No. But overall, he represented Christianity and capitalism. And by taking him out, they're proving that's who they're going after. And here are the communists. Joining me now is Shahram Hadian. We got a lot to get to. Shahram, what do you make of those opening remarks?
I completely agree with you 100%, Brandon. First of all, the 6 points that you read there, totally align with the Marxist communist ideology on the left. I would argue, I would add that they also align with the green side of that axis in regards to the same agenda, right? Because we know that the Islamic agenda carries forth with it the same goals. The ending of capitalism, the ending of Western society, free thought, Christianity. The only difference is that Islam obviously is not going to promote the so-called queer LGBT agenda in the upper house. It will in the lower house and promote it, pretend like they're for it, pretend like they're, advocating for it. But this is ought to be what you and I talked about earlier on radio. This ought to be the moment where we understand that the civil war has been declared and is already being fought. We are, I don't even feel like we have our foot. Most people have their foot in the battlefield. The battlefield is all around us. It's already being waged. They've already declared war, just like Islam declares war in their lower house, which is called the House of War. This leftist side is declaring war and using a group of confused, disenfranchised, demonically, obsessed, possessed individuals, Brandon, that are so seared in their thought process and their conscience that whoever they're told is the enemy. And as you said earlier on radio, put a gun in their hand, and now you have an army. So when are we going to realize that this battle is far underway? And yes, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but we also have to understand what the tactical approach is, who the players are, and that this organization, this Salt Lake Armed Queers for Salt Lake City, is just one. Brandon, this is just one organization of hundreds that are coordinating and working together. In fact, I don't know if you saw this, you may have already posted this, but they were connecting this group to the group that was in Elm Fork Branch, the John Brown Gun Club, where they were training a lot of these members of the so-called trans community, which, remember now, half of Antifa is trans. And that group is implicated in the July 4th killing of a Texas ICE agent. That's in the state of Texas. This is in the state of Utah. What does that tell you? There is cross-country or international coordination. And then the video that you're going to play, that they actually went to Cuba. Again, where, this is ridiculous. Our law enforcement community is so corrupt that these groups shouldn't be operating, let alone having this kind of freedom to move about and go into foreign countries and get training from known Marxists on revolution.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying, and I want to imply this group had anything to do with the murder of Charlie Kirk, but here's what this website says. Law enforcement officials are reviewing whether any individuals or network connected to the group or to the online communities, including gaming platforms and social pages, had prior knowledge of or provided material support for the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson. Now, I don't know if Tyler was the shooter or not. I tend to think not. I tend to think that he's a patsy. And the more I review videos today, and I think I sent some to you, or maybe you and I talked about it, but I sent some to some of my friends. I said, the more I review this and listen to guys that are snipers and experts, the more I'm thinking, I'm not being dogmatic. I'm just saying the more I'm willing to see, and I'm willing to be proven wrong either way. But the more I look at it, the more I'm thinking that the shot came from the side, and I'm not saying it was one of his security people and all the other garbage going around, but I'm starting to think the shot may have come from the side, and what we are told is the entry wound is actually the exit wound. So I think there's a lot of questions. Why I don't think this kid's the shooter. Where was he getting the training? Could you pull off a shot like that? People say, if you're a deer hunter in the South, a lot of kids that age could do it. Okay, but can you do it under distress? Can you do it under distress? And surely if you had deer hunters in the South, kids that age that could do it, how many years were they deer hunting and having practice? When was this guy practicing? Where was he getting practice at a 200-yard range, right? Most of these gun ranges, they're not 200 yards, but any of them that are, where you can go out and do that kind of thing, I'm pretty sure most of them have cameras and they know who's coming in and out of their ranges. So someone will have to prove to me that this kid was proficient in shooting, had practiced a lot, could make that shot. But I think he's a patsy. And, reality is I don't know who did it. But I know after Kash Patel, after it came out today because of Senator Charles Grassley, that the FBI was tracking Turning Point USA and other conservative groups. I still think it's the red-green axis, with the government giving way for this, just like they gave inside job and a way for July 13th with Butler, Pennsylvania, and President Trump. So the point I guess I'm making is there are a lot of people probably involved in this, and there certainly seem to be groups that had foreknowledge with what they were saying about, be sure you watch tomorrow, something big's going to happen, blah, 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 Charlie Kirk event. But why are the Marxists using the LGBTQ groups? I've already mentioned that. These are their coalition of victims. But I think it goes to more than that. I think it also is an antithesis, right? Hegelian dialectic. Christians versus not just communists, but Christians versus people that are out there so morally that you couldn't have a more thesis and antithesis than conservative Christians versus communist queers. I mean, it's like, and as I said with Rasmussen tonight, Mark Mitchell, I think the Civil War has already started. The left is already in the streets. They just keep trying to bring the right out. The right's not willing to take the bait, thankfully, but they want us in the street, right? But why are we using queers? Now, again, that's their term, not mine. That used to be smear the queer. We used to play that game when we were kids, and that was considered a derogatory term. Now they celebrate that's what they call themselves. But many years ago, I don't know, 2007, 2008. I did a whole series on the LGBTQ, queer, homosexual, trans crowd inside Nazi Germany. I remember watching a military documentary that talked about how many of the bodyguards around Adolf Hitler were known homosexuals who liked to share pictures of their boyfriends with each other. Okay, Hitler apparently liked the masculine queers. Erwin Lutzer wrote a book called Hitler's Cross. Everyone should read it. In the book, he talks about one of the people around Hitler, high up in the SS, that was known as a cross-dresser. Many people will say that the Night of the Long Knives, where a bunch of leaders were taken out, was to cover their sexual perversion and get rid of these guys because it was too much was about to come out. But why would you, and this is exactly what I said in 2008 in one of my radio shows, why would you choose to put homosexuals, queers, and I'm not labeling every homosexual, but why would you choose to put people like this in places like this? Because I think their conscience has been seared. And I think after you groom these kids, you groom them, you rape them, you molest them, you get them involved in these activities until you sever their conscience. Not only do you sever their conscience, you make them a part of a group. And the group is now where you find solace for any guilt that you might have until your conscience is fully seared. But you can't go back. You can't go back home. You can't return home. Physically, you might go home, but you can't return home to where you used to be with a relationship with your siblings, your parents, your grandparents. And these kids start to isolate themselves, stay in their bedroom, not want to come home, move out, not come back around, because they have experienced something that no longer causes them to have fellowship, harmony, relationship, and community with family. And if you don't think that's not part of a brainwashing operation, listen to what Erwin Lutzer writes in his excellent book, Hitler's Cross. Quote, Himmler, who's, of course, one of the leaders of the SS, Himmler was faced with the problem of how to take decent German young men and deaden their conscience so that they would be willing to perform ghastly deeds of cruelty. Both Hitler and Himmler believed that each of the SS troops had to perform some deed that violated his conscience and sense of decency. Only when they did what others found to be reprehensible would they break away from their old values. Their conscience had to be deadened through these acts of barbarism that would serve the dual purpose of cutting the recruit off from his past ties, his family, and his friends, and of bonding him to his new peers and his leader. The break would be so complete that he could never go back. An act of torture or murder would unite him with blood brothers who had crossed the line, felt the same numbness, and swore themselves to uphold the same cause. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Well, I mean, what insight and what testimony with what Erwin Lutzer is talking about there. But really, Brandon, when you look at the history of power and you see, even going back, I remember reading a lot about the Roman Empire and how that was such a part of the upper leadership of the Roman Empire, was the idea of having the homosexuals, having anybody that was, what we now are, calling, they're calling queer. It goes back to even, think about in the Bible, even in the story of Jezebel, where she had around her eunuchs, right? And so when you think about trans, when you think about LGBTQ, when you think about those who are spiritually eunuchs or those who've been altered, in the trans community where they've actually physically been altered, that physically cut off their body parts to be able to, quote, transition, that spiritual surrounding of these individuals, I think you're so right on, where their conscience is so seared. Now that opens the floodgates for any level of evil and make them victims and give them the platform as the media, as our government, as the educational system, the medical system, and even many churches have, then now they become a force where they're empowered. And look at this group that you brought up in Salt Lake. The empowerment, in my opinion, and what I was telling you earlier on the radio is the whatever research I could do. First of all, so much of their pages have been scrubbed of this group, whether on Instagram, on Facebook. The leader of this group that I mentioned to you is a trans individual who's pretending to be a woman. But there is some debate about whether she's from Iran or a, quote, Palestinian. Either way, I said to you earlier, I believe that these are foreign aided individuals. And didn't the group, Brandon, go again to Cuba and get training?
Yes, and we're going to play that video. Yep,
yeah,
they sure did.
So you not only have the environment of our nation that is very much acting like Nazi Germany, where we have elevated these individuals into positions of power and authority. And my goodness, look at the last administration and look at the people that they were putting into places of authority who were, trans, queer.
And I'm a little concerned about Peter Thiel, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not too interested in seeing some of these people make it into high places and have control over us.
Besson, what's his name? The finance guy on Trump. He's a avowed homosexual, married to his husband. Who was the one that he had in his last administration that was national security? Grinnell, so you start seeing the surrounding of these people around the politics. I think spiritually, this is very much in the spirit of the Jezebel spirit. And I'm talking about in the sense of again, surrounding with neutered, surrounding with effeminate, surrounding with those who've had their conscience seared. We see this in so many different aspects of the Bible and in the aspects of world history.
And it used to be considered a mental problem in America.
Right.
And then we started, and they were a security risk, et cetera, and open to blackmail, and they weren't, you just couldn't do it. But now, there are no standards. And the Bible says if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? I want to go back to Hitler real quick in Germany.
Yes, sir.
Lutzer writes this. 2 years after Hitler's victory, the term unnatural was purged from the definition of homosexuality in the German criminal code. So all the people are saying, the homosexuals were all thrown into concentration camps. True, some were, but it was mostly the effeminate, okay, if you go back and research it. Even gay historian Jonathan Katz reports that though police repeatedly apprehended homosexual actors and artists engaged in sodomy, they were not to be arrested. It would have been strange indeed if the Nazis had singled out homosexuals for special persecution, since the movement itself was rampant with various kinds of sexual perversion. Historian Samuel Igra states that Hitler's initial brown shirts began as an exclusive homosexual and bisexual organization. Hitler's personal secretary, Rudolf Hess, listen now, Hitler's personal secretary, Rudolf Hess, was a bisexual known in homosexual circles as Fräulein Anna. He was a cross-dresser. He was a trans. Homosexuality was rampant in Hitler's inner circle, as well as in the SS, as boys were rounded up from the Hitler Youth to participate in sexual orgies. Of course, Hitler railed against homosexuals, just as he did occultists, though he himself was a dedicated Satanist. Erwin Lutzer, Hitler's Cross, everyone should read it. Now, the point I'm making is regimes that have gone after people, conservatives, Christians, capitalists, Jews, they like to apparently use people whose conscience has been seared, or they have done things that is so against the natural order of God that they will coalesce around a community of like-minded people and then be used to do barbaric things. That's the point I'm making. And when you start taking queers, by their own admission, that's what they call themselves, and then you start training them and the communists hijack them, well, what do you think is going to happen when you have a bunch of people who are being desensitized, maybe all the way to their conscience being seared, as the Bible talks about, and then you start arming them and claiming that the people that are their oppressors are those that are speaking truth? No wonder they're going to start hunting and are now starting to hunt down Christians.
Yeah. And Brandon, not just speaking the truth, but now the narrative, they add to the narrative that those Christians or those conservatives are trying to kill you. And that's why one of the narratives is, right, oh, well, if you don't allow us to transition, we're going to commit suicide or we're going to harm ourselves. But really, the reality is they're the ones who are the fascists, the Marxists. They're the ones. And as you were talking, again, I was thinking about two things. One is, any jihadist organization within Islam on the green side of the axis, they do the same thing to their people. They have to get them to the point where their conscience are seared. And those who don't have their conscience are seared, when they go into an area of, quote, battle to commit acts of jihad, to rape, pillage, kill, behead non-Muslims and or lukewarm Muslims, they are oftentimes drugged up. They're oftentimes high on speed, amphetamines, because that then numbs their conscience, right? Because either way, you got to either have a seared conscience or a numbed conscience in order to be able to carry out that type of an atrocity. And then that's number one. The second part of what the Islamic side does, going to what you said, is again, they also are using this disenfranchised, so-called victimized minority, i.e. the LGBTQ, to do their bidding. So you over and over and over again, we see the connection to this red-green access and it's not, we're not beating a dead horse. And you said earlier on radio, I thought it was really good. It's almost the red, green, and pink access now. I like what you said there, because it is truly, they're bringing them in. The problem is when Islam gets to the upper house, as I just read to you before we went on air, the city of Hamtramck, Michigan, which was the first Muslim majority city in America, one of the first things they did, their Muslim city council and their Muslim mayor, was to ban the pride flags, and a federal judge just upheld that ban. I guarantee you, if that was a, quote, Christian city council, there's no way federal judges would have upheld the ban to ban pride flags. But here is the part that concerns me, and that is, not only are these groups concerning, but there's two things that are happening. One, there's either, again, no oversight. So we have a completely incompetent FBI, Homeland Security, and
well, that's because they're too busy tracking on conservatives and moms at school board meetings and Kirk's organization, Charlie Kirk's organization, according to the breaking news today by U.S. Senator Grassley of Iowa. They're tracking Turning Point USA. Why they're not? They don't have time to track the queers that are armed. They don't have time to track the queers that are armed that are coming back from Cuba. I mean, in fact, for those who doubt this, here's the video. Here's the video of them talking about it. Listen, here we go.
The Belly of the Beast documentary that we had watched there, I think it was from this, where it mentioned that while the students at Elam, who came from Gaza, were there to study medicine, that simultaneously they, just by virtue of being there, studied revolution. And I think that school really probably forms consciousness for a lot of people when they're there to just study how to help people. And of course, that makes sense. And I think that...
Hold on, Logan, that's not the right video. Doggone it. We'll have to edit this.
Hey, Brandon, why you got that up? Because that was actually very telling.
We're going to edit this part, but okay.
Oh, sorry, okay. Do you want me to comment or no? You want to wait?
I'm trying to find the video I played earlier where they went into detail on where they went to Cuba. It didn't have the stupid music behind it. It was much better. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Did it? But that one was like 7 minutes long or longer.
It's on Benny Johnson's page. Well, no, there's one that says that she's talking about they went to Cuba, 90 miles from America, and they have in it a president.
I'm there now on Data Republicans page. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Where is it?
Benny Johnson.
Oh, Logan got it. Logan bookmark.
You got it? Yeah.
Okay, here we go, Logan. This is the one we'll drop in. Here we go. Thank you, Logan. Here we go. All right, here we go.
Hi, we're Armed Queers. My name's Connor.
My name is Ramia.
and we have just returned from the annual May Day Brigade that is put on by the National Network on Cuba. We are a member organization of the National Network on Cuba, and the May Day Brigade is annual brigade, as I said earlier, where we go to Cuba, we interact with people from a bunch of different countries, and most importantly, we learn from the Cuban people, and we go to the May Day March.
Yes. I think this trip of ours was so incredibly informative and educational, and I think what is incredible is that these brigades have been hosted for decades, right? They've been hosted since the 20th century, and it's really to ensure that US activists are building this kind of solidarity with the Cuban people, and essentially we're breaking that propaganda, breaking that barrier of information that the US is trying to hide from us about just how successful the revolution is, and also just how steadfast and passionate the Cuban people are in protecting the revolution.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the dual purpose of our trip. Simultaneously, we were there in Cuba to learn of the successes of the revolution and bring it back home with us. But simultaneously, we also were bringing to Cuba stories of the hardships in the US and of the oppression we face here from our government. And I think that helped also teach the Cuban people about our situation. Often you would hear people surprised when people would say like, oh, we don't have free healthcare, or like our universities act this way, and people would be like, oh, that's just a foreign concept there in Cuba. And I think that kind of speaks to the overall culture there.
Totally. I think we had visited an school that was for children with different learning barriers, with different disabilities. And essentially this school was so comprehensive in the way that it taught the children who were attending. They had provided them meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. They had provided them snacks. They essentially provided them every single activity that you can think of to help build their skills, from sewing to planting to music to dance. It was so incredible to see. And what was also surprising was that some of the children actually lived there. So some of the children who, because they had physical disability barriers, they weren't able to constantly travel back home into the school. They ended up staying there in dorms they had.
And also because of concerns with fuels, because the buses can't be driving to and fro their house every day.
Yes, which is one of the impacts of the blockade.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't know if these guys, or whatever they are so dumb to know that whenever Americans go to communist countries, they take them and show them things that are deliberately designed to make them believe that this is a utopia. This is a utopian society. Look how great it is, all right? They're not going to take you into the average home of a Cuban who is starving. They're not going to take you into the average doctor's practice that is, and I've heard firsthand from people about what medical care is like over there, okay? They're not going to take you to those places, okay? They're going to take you to the staged scenes. Now, whether those are schools that are set up for the communist elite or whether they were just fake schools they keep ready to go for when they bring people over and run them through their propaganda. The reality is these kids are too immature, too deceived to understand that Cuba is not some utopian society. They're just ridiculously ignorant, brainwashed. I want to play a short video, Sharam, of my friend Ron Carlson. Ron passed away in June of 2011. And this was Ron speaking at one of my Worldview weekends. He was supposed to return to Cuba, I think, for what was it, his 6th trip. He didn't make it because he passed away. But I want you to hear Ron Carlson telling you what it's really like, not the fake Disney World the Cubans put on a show for silly, stupid, brainwashed Americans to see and come back and tell these false, fake stories. The real Cuba. Listen to Ron Carlson.
In June, in another month, I'll be going down to Cuba for the 7th time. I've been able to trained over 3,000 Cuban pastors and church leaders over the last 8 years, all throughout the island of Cuba. And let me say, we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Cuba. I mean, Fidel and socialism has just destroyed Cuba. I mean, these people in America who think socialism is the answer, I tell them, move to Cuba. If you want to see what it's done. Do you know in Cuba, I was back there last May speaking for the 6th time. Do you know in Cuba right now, everybody's paid by the government. It doesn't matter whether you're a plumber, a teacher, a pastor, electrician, everybody is employed by the government. And everybody's equal, so everybody gets paid the same amount. And right now in Cuba, everybody gets paid $18 a month. That's what Cubans live on, $18 a month. And then they give you a ration card for 5 pounds of rice and 5 pounds of beans a month and a half a cup of cooking oil. Most Cubans, folks, right now are down to rice and beans once a day. Last year, the Cuban government outlawed beef. Anybody caught with beef is put in prison for a year. I mean, to show you how bizarre it is, here you got an island nation surrounded by an ocean full of fish with 11 million starving people, and nobody's allowed to fish. There are no fishing boats, no fishing fleets, nobody's allowed to fish. If anybody had a fishing boat, they'd go 90 miles to Key West. Nobody's allowed to fish. I mean, the whole system has been destroyed by socialism and communism. But in the midst of that, God is doing some incredible things today. I mean, the Church of Jesus Christ is growing like wildfire. I was in Guamacoy, Cuba, speaking. Over 3,000 people jammed in the church on Sunday morning. Another church in Bayamo I was in, over 2,500 people jammed in Sunday morning to hear the gospel. God's doing some incredible things. In fact, my book, Fast Facts and False Teachings, we have on the table outside, was the first Christian book allowed to be printed in Cuba since 1959. When I first went in 8 years ago, I was invited to speak to the 250 key pastors from 14 different denominations in Cuba. And they'd asked me to come in and speak for a week to them. And they had told me, you're not allowed to bring anything into Cuba. We're at most allowed 3 books. And I thought, Lord, I'd love to give them each a copy of my book in Spanish. It's in Spanish all over the Spanish-speaking world. And I thought, Lord, somehow I'd love to give them each a copy of my book. So I got 250 Spanish copies of my book on cults and world religions and Christian apologetics. And I went to Walmart, bought 2 big soft-sided suitcases, was able to get 125 copies of my book in each suitcase, checked it to Havana along with my suitcase of clothes. Well, I get to Havana, this old Russian carousel starts going.
All right,
around.
I'm going to stop it right there, but it's 11 minutes. You guys would love to hear more. It's in our vault. That's one of the benefits of being our vault. You can go back there and pull out presentations by people like Ron Carlson, worldviewtube.com/vault. But notice what Cuba's really like, right? Not the Disneyland, fake, imaginary, stage setting, props, kind of like entering onto a sound stage in a fake Hollywood set that these queers said they went on in Cuba. That's the real Cuba you just heard from Ron Carlson.
Brandon, absolutely. And you probably don't know this. I don't know if I've ever told you, but I led 2 mission trips to Cuba.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So I attest to everything he said, 2003, 2004, because that was the last time that Americans can go in. And even then, when we went in under humanitarian conditions. We had to go in because we took medicine and we took things that were humanitarian. So first of all, we said earlier, to go to Cuba and come back and not be scrutinized by our government, that's what stinks to me. I was saying earlier, either incompetence or you have now complicity. You have a level of complicity within the deep state that they're turning an eye to this type of training. Number 2, like you said, Christianity is illegal. Christians are persecuted. The level of poverty. Most of the men are drunk during the day because they don't have jobs. Foreigners live high. The party leaders of the government live high. Everybody else suffers. So I can attest to that. but yet and Brandon, it's the same on the green side of the axis. They want to glorify the red. They want to make communism, Marxism, socialism seem wonderful. The same thing they want to do with Islamic countries. Oh, go visit an Islamic country and see how wonderful and tolerant and peaceful they are. Yeah, go visit the Islamic countries that are strictly governed by Islamic law and see how not wonderful they are. So this is the lie that is being told, particularly to these young people. And going back to the video, again, this guy, the guy that thinks that he is a she, I said to you earlier, and I was looking into this, the fact that her social media is almost scrubbed, and the fact that they've been operating, there is a connection. I believe what it is that one parent is from Iran and one parent is so-called Palestinian. And that's why they were talking about Palestine. They were talking about the suffering of the Palestinians. So right there, what do you have? You have the red-green axis again. Right there, it proves the same thing. Same with the Annunciation shooter, right? Just a few weeks ago in Minneapolis. What did he have on his weapons or on his magazines? He was praising, mashallah, praising Allah. He was talking about this is for the suffering children. 6 million Jews wasn't enough. So you have the same spirit, the same hatred, the same narrative, and many of the so-called pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas mob are these trans queer. Remember Queers for Palestine? How does that work? How does that work? It is they're the ones who are being played. These are sadly the useful idiots. But this individual, this guy that thinks she's a girl, I don't have hard evidence, but my instincts are telling me that she is an actual asset of the Iranian regime in America doing this. The Muslim countries, the Chinese, they have no. How many connections can we make from China to Black Lives Matter? Remember that?
Yep.
So they have no problem sowing the discord in this country using these pawns that their conscience are seared for their bidding. I'll stop there.
And look at this headline you sent me today. This is a poster out there. The revolution will not be voted in. Join armed queers. Okay. It says get organized and educated with fellow Marxists. Okay. Now again, when you go to their own page or this article and you look at their stuff, queer resistance with a hammer and sickle. Yeah. With a hammer and sickle. So we've got a real problem here, and people need to talk about it in the context of communism and them creating a coalition of victims and that say the source of all suffering and oppression are the Christians and the capitalists. And isn't that what Karl Marx said? My object in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. And his people are saying capitalism, Christianity, those are the big enemies. And then why are they choosing people like this? I think they're easily manipulated. Many of them have been abused, and some of them I think have had their conscience seared. So they make a great army. They make great cannon fodder for the revolution, so-called. And I do think the Civil War started. I just think the left cannot entice the right into the street, but I think that's what they want, and hopefully people won't take the bait. 2 more items before we let you go tonight. One of them is Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, came out and said this. This is very, very troubling. Listen.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
Okay. Wow. Now, this is very dangerous because there's one thing to make a terroristic threat. Okay, folks, listen clearly. Don't hear what you want to hear. Hear what I'm saying. Yeah. Terroristic threats are already against the law. Okay?
Correct.
A gunman from Saudi Arabia came into our event, My Worldview Weekend, in April of 2017 that Shram was speaking for with me. While I was speaking, that guy came in. My security that I hired privately noticed him filming, went up to him. he was armed, took him out. He made 2 videos brandishing 5 weapons, 2 semi-automatics, and what he said was 1,200 rounds of ammunition, threatening Shahram and I. He did 7 months in federal prison. Now, terroristic threats are already against the law. But to say that we're going to target people that are using hate speech, who defines hate speech? Okay.
Yeah.
This is a very slippery slope. And this is what I warned about in my book in 2016, The Coming Religious Reich, where the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Tony Blair, wanted hate crime laws that would prosecute people that denied the Holocaust. The rabbis came out and said, hey, we don't like Holocaust deniers, but we don't want to see them prosecuted, because that is a slippery slope. And now you're going to start prosecuting us for the things that we publicly believe and profess. We cannot trash free speech, okay? So they didn't even want to see the Holocaust deniers prosecuted. No, let's just debate them. Let's use facts. So when you have the Attorney General and the Trump administration talking like this, that's very dangerous. I want you to address that, and then I'm going to move to this attack of Israel, saying Israel's the one that killed Charlie. I want to address that with some facts from, I think, what is one of Charlie's own producers, and the man who's been dragged into it, he's made a statement as well. But address this by Pam Bondi, please.
100% agree with you. Deeply, deeply, deeply troubling. Number one, all you got to do, Brandon, is look at the way that has been used in Western Europe, in France, in the UK, in Germany, in Sweden, the way in Austria, the way they have used, quote, hate speech laws is been to protect now Islam and the ones who are doing the killing, doing all of the hate, and those who then try to warn about it, patriots, conservatives, those who are against the Islamization of Western Europe, they're the ones who are being jailed, even for speech. This is so problematic, and I warned people about this back in May when the president signed the executive order for the so-called Religious Liberty Commission, which, remember, he put 2 Muslims on, and Catholics and Jewish rabbis. So can I ask you a question, Brandon? When you're listening to that, Pam Bondi says of any group, so isn't all of my talks or a lot of your talks, they would easily be deemed as hate speech because we are speaking out against ideologies, in my case, predominantly against Islam. Well, that's targeting a people group. So here I am, Miss Bondi, here I am. I guess come arrest me. So this is deeply, deeply
Well, even Charlie
troubling.
Kirk knew it was. He said hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. Charlie Kirk would not be in favor of free speech. You know what really distresses me are the number of people that are, I'm afraid, going to hijack Charlie Kirk's name in order to push something that he himself would be against. That's very concerning to me.
Agreed.
Let me move to this. Candace Owen, Colin Rogg put out last night, and you can watch the video of Candace. Candace claims threats were made to Charlie Kirk during an intense intervention with Bill Ackman in the Hamptons weeks ago. Owens claims Kirk was having a change of heart on Israel before his death, and says he was contacted by Bibi Netanyahu. Quote, I know that Charlie was offered a ton of money in this moment and a ton of money, end quote. Ackman has denied it. Yeah, he's denied it. In fact, we have his tweet where he's denying it. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here it is. All right, here's Bill Ackman himself. This afternoon at Real Candace Owen slandered me by accusing me of staging an intervention with Charlie Kirk in which threats were made with respect to his supposed evolving stance on Israel at an event I hosted in the Hamptons. Candace also intimated that I blackmailed Charlie. On the show, Candace said that she'd be very happy for me to dispute this narrative. While it pains me to drive more traffic to her program, I'm responding here to clear my name. It saddens me that we live in a society where social media influencers seek to monetize the tragic death of Charlie Kirk. For the record, at no time have I ever threatened Charlie Kirk, Turning Point, or anyone associated with him. I have never blackmailed anyone, let alone Charlie Kirk. I've never offered Charlie or Turning Point any money in an attempt to influence Charlie's opinion or anything. In fact, my interactions with Charlie Kirk have been extremely cordial, albeit limited, regretfully so. as I was very impressed by him and his work, and I will sadly never see him again. In an effort to clear the record, I share the following. I followed Charlie Kirk for some time and greatly admired him. While I did agree with Charlie on every issue, I had enormous respect for his intelligence, vast knowledge about religion, and his willingness to take on all corners in open mic sessions, all comers, et cetera, et cetera. It's a rather long post. I won't read it all, but he's saying this is absolutely ridiculous. Then we have, I think, what is his producer. Logan, is Andrew Colvett his producer? That's his producer? Now he's hosting the show? Okay. He's hosting the show and he was a sit-in. He said, quote, I've been asked about the Bill Ackman event more than a few times now, so I asked our staff who was traveling with Charlie Kirk to find out what's true and what's not. His team was with him 100% of the time when he wasn't in his hotel room. Here's what they told me. Quote, Bill never yelled at Charlie, never pressed him on Bibi, never gave him a list of Charlie's offenses against Israel, end quote. There was concern raised about having Tucker at SAS. We don't believe this came from Bill. And Charlie's reply was, quote, honestly, people telling me not to have Tucker makes me want to have Tucker, and I'm going back to lock him in for Amerifest too, end quote. Charlie personally told me he had a very cordial relationship with Bill, and the event was productive. Those are the facts. Now we have another tweet, Logan, that has been put out by this gentleman. Who's this gentleman? This is a guy that was supposedly at the event with Bill Ackman and Charlie Kirk. He said, yes, dozens of influencers, including myself, were invited to an event by Charlie and his team, not by Bill Ackman. Charlie wanted to get to know rising conservative voices and where we stood on various issues. Two, the subject matters were primarily about the following topics: Islam's growing presence in the West, marriage/dating, Mandandi, right-wing infighting, the economy, and various narratives regarding Israel. Three, Charlie wanted to see us respectfully debate him and each other. There was a range of views there on every topic. He wanted to learn our perspective and analyze our debating skills from an objective point of view. He goes on to talk about Bill and Charlie never debated or argued. I don't know where that narrative came from. If it happened, it certainly wasn't around any of us. Bill mostly spoke about marriage and economics, then chilled with us. Five, I'm not going to pretend I know every thought of Charlie, but he very much stood with Israel. His frustrations expressed during the Hamptons event were that many people debated the topic emotionally rather than logically. Mind you, this was a small portion of the event. And it goes on from there. So this seems to be a completely made-up narrative, but yet, boy, the internet is burning up with this and implying that somehow the Israeli government killed Charlie Kirk or had a hand in it. You want to speak to this?
Well, Brandon, this goes back to what I said to you earlier on radio today, that this is why I think that, again, this axis is at play here. How much of Candace Owens' influence is coming from Qatar? How much of Candace Owens' influence and thoughts is coming from her conversion to Catholicism and being influenced by replacement theology? And how much of it is just now getting spiritually unclean and demonic because of this just vile hatred where it's just Jews, 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 Jews all the time. And now it's the fact that the Jews killed Charlie Kirk. So I'm not surprised by this. What I am surprised is how many people are buying into it and going along with this narrative. I guess it shows you where we're at, where, as we've said multiple times, you've said it, I've said it, we do not blanketly endorse the Israeli government. We're standing on the word of God. We believe God's word, God's promises, their return to the land, the rebirth of the nation, their sovereignty, their right to self-defense, their right to pieces of land like Gaza and Judea and Samaria, and also the fact that we recognize that our Messiah is Jewish and that that's our heritage, spiritually speaking. But I think that this is the foreign influence once again trying to come against Christians, the true stance of God in this hour. And now they've sullied Charlie Kirk's name because, you know, the guy can't defend himself. He can't come out. And by the way, 2 weeks ago, Brandon, 2 weeks ago, I was critical of Charlie Kirk. I said it on my own show. Why do you keep platforming Candace Owens? Why do you keep platforming Tucker Carlson? He was committed to doing it. That's his prerogative. But it was also my prerogative to say, these individuals have shown that they are being foreign influenced. I believe that this is money influence from foreign governments, including the Qataris, into these mouthpieces. But Candace's problem is far deeper than that. And it's just, it's spiritually vile, and it's very dangerous because it's further eroding what already is tenuous support of Israel among Christians.
Indeed. Shahram Hadian, tilministry.com, tilministry.com. He's also carried here on Saturday and Sundays at worldviewtube.com. We produce and sponsor his show here at worldviewtube.com. As always, Shahram, thank you for your willingness to dig in and bring us analysis that we're really not going to get from a lot of other places. So thank you for taking part in that tonight.
Thank you, Brandon, for being willing to cover this stuff. Like you said, very few places are going to cover this. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And it's always a privilege. Thank you so much.
It's a team effort. And folks, if you do appreciate what we're doing, we need your support now more than ever. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Please go there and help us continue to push out Christian worldview programming. It is tax deductible. We are a church, and it is automatically tax deductible under the IRS rules. Go look that up. If you make a contribution, we will send you a tax receipt the first week of every February. That's what we endeavor to do. And so you can make a contribution at worldviewfoundation.com. I do host a church service every Sunday night, have for years. As you know, I'm teaching through the book of Revelation. I just finished Revelation chapter 20 Sunday night, on to 21 coming up very soon. By the way, if you'd like to watch my entire series on Revelation, you can go now to lastdaysstudy.com, lastdaysstudy.com. I got that right, Logan? Lastdaysstudy.com. All 48 lessons are there. Very soon, I have a commentary coming out on the book of Revelation, a verse-by-verse commentary on the book of Revelation. It'll also have study notes, so you can use this as a study guide while you watch the series. So you can do it as an individual or a family, a Christian school, homeschool co-op, or maybe at your work or neighborhood. You can study the book of Revelation verse by verse in layman terms. That commentary will be out very, very soon as I finish up here in the next few weeks with chapter 21 and chapter 22. We're already working on the commentary and study guide now. So that'll be out. That's Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, our Sunday night church service brought to you by our church, worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you for your contribution now at worldviewfoundation.com. We are looking for more regular monthly contributors. Would you please consider doing that, becoming a monthly contributor? You can set up an automatic account and do that through either PayPal or your credit card there at worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. We'll be right back after this very short break. Annie Cyrus up next. Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.